do it.
So if you're hearing some
So the
visitors,
whole room
I'm going to mute them real quick.
It's muted. Yes.
it was.
So Gina, is the room that you're in called the art room? What is that laptop?
It is called the art room laptop, but we're in the theater.
Okay, I'm going to mute them. I'm going to mute you though while y'all are getting settled. I see my friend Arlene. Hello. Hello, friend. It's been a while. You're muted though, but you can feel free to unmute while we're getting people in.
How are you?
Good to see you. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
So we've got people coming in from all over, and I'm going to let people get settled and give us one more minute. And Arlene, I'm going to mute you back just while we're getting everybody in. Where is Hannah? Just saw your name, Hannah.
Hi.
Hi, there she is. Hi, Hannah. I'm glad
Hi,
you're
how are
here.
you?
I'm going to give us one more minute if we can wait just a sec.
Okay.
Do we have your guest Khalid here also?
Yes, he is here.
Ahmadzai, is that how you say that?
Yes, that's right.
Ahmadzai. Okay, awesome. Wonderful. I just want to make sure we've got everybody coming in. I do have a few more people. So Hannah, I was telling Glenn and Dee Dee, I don't know if you were in the room, that we will be able to share the link now that we're able to record. So we'll do that after this presentation. Right now, we're just putting this to our private Facebook group.
Okay. Perfect. That's great.
But I'll go ahead and record.
Okay.
Oh, we sound so ominous. People are still coming. We have a group here at LifeQuest that is also in a room together that is able to watch in a theater setting. So there's more people than reflected in the Zoom participants. This has gotten a lot of interest. Look at this. Okay.
Great.
And you're still coming. Okay, well, while people are getting settled in, I'm going to go ahead and get started because we don't have all day, but we do have until about 1 o'clock. Is that okay with you, Dee Dee and Hannah and your guests? Okay, and I'll give us about a 5-minute until time, and you can let me know when it's time to break for questions. But hello, everyone. I'm Leah Greenfield. I'm the Executive Director of LifeQuest of Arkansas. We have a special presentation for you today that has gotten a lot of interest, and I'm so excited to welcome Hannah Lee. You can wave, Hannah. I don't know if everybody can see you. She is with Canopy Northwest Arkansas, and Dee Dee Long. But I'm going to first let you hear a little bit more about how this all came together from Glenn Harrison. Glenn is a LifeQuest member. He has been an instructor. He's been on our curriculum committee. He has coordinated classes, and he brings together people that we would not ordinarily be able to meet. And so he's a great connector for us. Glenn, tell us who we have today.
Okay, I'm going to talk just a little bit about the Fulbright Association. The talk today is being sponsored both by LifeQuest and the Fulbright Association. The Fulbright Association is the U.S. Alumni Association of the Fulbright Scholarship Program, representing over 150,000 alumni since the scholarship's inception 75 years ago. It was established in 1977. And the association extends the Fulbright experience of international educational exchange into a lifetime of education, advocacy, and service. We have 57 chapters across the U.S., who host local and regional programs in order to connect alumni in meaningful ways, increase the visibility of the program, and promote international education and cultural understanding. The Fulbright community was hit hard following the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021, with the displacement of more than 100 Afghan Fulbright students and scholars, both at home and around the U.S. Many of these scholars had studied at the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville, and some are still in limbo regarding their immigration status. The Arkansas Fulbright chapter reached out to Canopy to see how it might learn more about the Afghan resettlement program and how it could contribute to those efforts. Public education seemed like the best way to start, and the opportunity to partner with LifeQuest of Arkansas to learn more about the work of Canopy was an ideal collaboration. So thank you, Dee Dee, for your collaboration, and we'll turn it over to Hannah now.
I'm muted. I just want to jump in and say thank you to both Dee Dee and Hannah for pulling this all together. Hannah is the Director of Community Engagement for the Canopy Northwest Arkansas organization, which is a group committed to refugee resettlement, and they're located in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Their mission is to create a community where refugees are welcomed and equipped with all they need to build new lives. So thank you, Hannah, for bringing your group to our attention and for us to get to know you better.
Oh my goodness, yes. Thank you so much for having us. We are really excited to be here. We've been looking forward to this for, well, since I connected with Dee Dee. So really excited and just really thankful for all of you. I wanted to go ahead and introduce my incredible colleague and dear, dear friend, Khalid Ahmadzai. He's also joining me on this call today, and he will talk for a few minutes about Canopy's Afghan Placement and Assistance Program and a little bit about Afghanistan as well. He is Canopy's Director of Economic Advancement. So wonderful, wonderful honor to have him here with us. Okay, so to start, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. If you can.
We need to give you permission to do that. Hang on, I didn't.
Okay.
Let me find you. Our okay, you should be able to.
Perfect. Thank you. Go ahead and present. Okay, can everyone see that?
I can, yes.
Okay, all right, y'all. So Canopy NWA, we are welcoming refugees to Northwest Arkansas. And to go ahead and hop right in, we already talked a little bit about this, but at our core, we are a group of Northwest Arkansas residents who are working to create a community where refugees are welcomed and equipped with all they need to build new lives. And so we really talk about that as a double facet of our work, and want to make sure that whenever we welcome folks, it's always accompanied with the actual piece of equipping folks with the different pieces that they need to start over. And so we'll talk about that a little more in depth. So I wanted to talk a little bit about today's agenda. So we'll talk a lot about why welcome matters. And so as a little rundown, a quick rundown of our presentation today, we'll talk about refugee resettlement and what it is, as sort of a high level picture of resettlement in the US. And then we'll talk about our Afghan placement program and Canopy's work, ongoing work, and how you can help right here and right now. So to start, it's really important, first and foremost, to understand what it means for someone to be a refugee. who is a refugee? What does that mean? And it's actually a pretty specific definition. And when we talk about folks who are refugees, we are really referring to folks who are under the legal status of refugee. That's their status. And so by definition from the United Nations, High Commission on Refugees, a refugee is a person who is unable or unwilling to return to his or her home country because of a well-founded fear of persecution. And that persecution is due to his or her identity. So it's something very, very vulnerable. It's a very vulnerable place to be a refugee. And so this persecution can be based on race, religion, political opinion, membership of a social group. So those are an example of folks that would fall into that category, are folks who are being persecuted because they're a member of the LGBTQ community or nationality. So when we look at those pieces of identity, of what it means, you have to prove that you're being persecuted based on one of these things. It's such a vulnerable place to be. It's such a vulnerable place to be. So the families that we work with and families who flee their home are some of the most vulnerable people in the world, truly. So right now, there are 26 million refugees worldwide, and that number continues to grow every single day. With Afghanistan, what's happening in Afghanistan, that number continues to grow. What's happening in Guatemala, what's happening in Ukraine. So we are seeing that number, that 26 million refugees, continue to grow every single day. Around 37,000 people are forced to flee their homes every single day. Every single day, we're seeing around 37,000 people who have to leave their home. So when we look at the historical levels of folks that we were resettling through the refugee resettlement program in the United States, historically, since the program was instated in the 80s, we have resettled around 90 to 125,000 refugees a year on average. In 2016, we saw that drop just a smidge to 85,000. And then over the next 4 years from 2016, it was really slashed until we were resettling just at 12,000 in 2020. Last fiscal year, so 2022, that cap was set back at a historical norm of 125,000, really as a precedent for the resettlement program going forward. But due to a lot of things, due to places shutting down, we only resettled about 17,600 folks last year. And then under the Afghan placement and assistance program, we resettled about 78,000 Afghans. And so we'll talk more about that in just a minute. So the next piece that's really important. How does someone who flees their home get to the United States? This is a question we get asked all of the time. How do refugees go from fleeing Syria into Turkey and then coming to the US? How does that happen? What is that process? A lot of times when we talk about refugees, folks immediately think of folks who just walk right into the United States. And that is absolutely not the process. So for someone to come to the United States through the refugee resettlement program, it's a very long process. So number one, they have to flee their homeland, they have to flee and seek protection. And on average around the world, the wait in refugee camps is about 18 years, but it can be as long as 26 years for some folks. That number, the 18 years, is really hard to come by because it varies so drastically from region to region. So in some places, we'll see folks who don't wait very long. They wait for less than a year to be resettled. And then in other places, especially in Eastern and Central Africa, and some of our Burmese families and some of our Syrian families, they wait for about 15 years or longer. So we have a lot of families, for example, who are Congolese families who have been in camps. They met their spouse in a refugee camp. they had children in a refugee camp, raised their children in a refugee camp, had grandkids in a refugee camp before coming to the United States to start over. So it can be a really long wait for a lot of folks. So once a refugee flees and seeks protection, they have three options. They can return home, which is very rare because in order to return home, the threat of why they fled in the first place has to be neutralized. And for refugee crises, the reason that folks flee in mass is typically due to a political uprising or a very high level of persecution. So that takes oftentimes years and years and decades to be safe for some folks. So for example, a lot of our families who fled to the Congo, that is consequence of the Rwandan genocide. And so we're still seeing fallout from that genocide. So when we're talking about folks who are refugees, who are part of crises, we're not talking about situations that can be rectified within a couple of years. A lot of times they won't be rectified within someone's lifetime. So returning home is not always an option, and a lot of times it's not an option. For the most part, it's not an option. So the second choice, the second option would be to integrate into the receiving country. So if we're talking about a family that fled Syria and fled and went into Turkey, for example, those receiving countries, they tend to be bordering countries, and oftentimes they are overwhelmed with the amount of folks who are fleeing into their country. And so their economy, geographically, they cannot, socially, they can't take any more families, any more refugees. And so that's not an option. And then often receiving countries are not necessarily friendly to some refugees. And so again, there are different reasons why that might not be an option. For most families who flee, integrating into the receiving country is the option that they go with. That's the most common scenario, is that they stay and integrate into that receiving country. Resettlement is the last option, and it is the most rare. So less than 1% of refugees each year are actually resettled. So it's a very small number. And when we think about, again, the definition of being a refugee, you're already the vulnerable of the vulnerable. You're already extremely vulnerable. To be at a place where you cannot return home, nor can you integrate into the receiving country for some reason, that means that you are within the vulnerable, the most vulnerable, within an already very vulnerable group. So it's a very small amount of people. And so when we resettle families, when they come through that process, we're talking about less than 1% of more than 26 million people are going to come through that. And that's resettlement across the globe. So the United States is one of many resettlement agencies. So it's very, very hard to be resettled as a refugee. So once a refugee seeks protection, and let's say that the United Nations says, okay, we're going to have to resettle your family, they're then referred to a resettlement program around the world. The United States is one of many. So let's say they're referred to the United States Refugee Program. They then go through a vetting process, which is extremely, extremely extensive and consists of vetting through biometric data checks, security checks, multiple interviews, health screenings, the list goes on. It's really extensive. And that takes approximately 4.5 years. And this all happens while the person is still in their country, is still in the country where they fled. So this doesn't happen once a family's in the United States. It happens before they can come to the US. So if we're talking about a family, for example, who fled Rwanda, and now they're in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and they've been there for 23 years, and they are referred to the United States Resettlement Program, on average, they have to wait another 4 years for their screening to go through. So it's a really long process. So once a family goes through that vetting process and everything clears, everyone in the family, so if there's a family of 10, every single family member has to clear at the same time. They are approved and resettled. And that is really where Canopy's work comes in. So Canopy has resettled families from over a dozen countries around the globe, and most of our families come from the Democratic Republic of Congo and Afghanistan. So that's the vast majority of our families come from those two countries. Right now, Canopy has resettled around 450 people since we were founded in 2016, which is really, really cool. In fact, since Canopy started in 2016, Swahili is now the 4th most spoken language in the Fayetteville school system, which is really cool, after English, Spanish, and Marshallese. So now how did they get to Northwest Arkansas? If you have traveled around the globe, you know that most people do not know where Arkansas is. And so, of course, when a family gets referred to the resettlement program, they don't choose to come to Arkansas, Northwest Arkansas necessarily. That is actually their case is allotted. If they have family ties, so if they have family members in Arkansas, they can ask to come to Arkansas, but otherwise they are sent where they are told to go. So the resettlement program is a federal program. So it starts at the Department of State, which works with 9 big resettlement agencies, one of which is Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services. And that is Canopy's mom organization, so to speak. LIRS sends Canopy the cases that we get. So Canopy is a subcontracted with LIRS, and that's where our cases come from. So the Department of State sends it down to one of these big 9. If they send it to LIRS, LIRS then looks at their 6 agencies they work with, one of which is Canopy, and will send it to the best place. So at that level, at that more local level, that is when we will start trying to build out pockets of community. So because Canopy works with a lot of Congolese families, Afghan families, Syrian families, Guatemalan families, LIRS is more likely to send us folks from those regions because we're starting to build pockets of community around Northwest Arkansas. So a little bit about what we do at Canopy. We work in reception and placement, and we ensure that resettlement, these basic needs are met. So that includes housing, that includes being picked up from the airport, your first 3 days of groceries, a hot meal when you get to Northwest Arkansas. When we prepare hot meals, we really try to do things that are culturally relevant, but sometimes folks will try to give a little bit of Arkansas culture too. So for example, we just had a Guatemalan family come to the United States, and their volunteer team that we assigned them, they, for their hot meal upon their arrival, when they got to their new home, they had a hot meal waiting for them. They had some Guatemalan dishes, and they also baked them an apple pie so that they could have a little bit of Guatemala and a little bit of Arkansas. So we make sure these basic needs are met, and we have up to 8 months to do that. And so that includes case management services, so things like applying for Social Security, getting them a cell phone, teaching folks how to use a mailbox, how to navigate a pharmacy. And then we have employment services. So our employment services help our families, eligible working adults, to get into jobs as quickly as possible so that they can become financially self-sufficient as quickly as possible. Our employment team has an incredibly high rate of getting folks self-sufficient. So about 87% of our households are self-sufficient by that 8-month mark. The national average is about 45%. So Canopy, and a part of that is because of Northwest Arkansas and the community in the community where we live. So we have, through the resettlement program, we have that 8-month period where we can really work to meet needs. But if you've ever lived abroad, if you've ever moved to a new place, you know that 8 months is nowhere long enough to make somewhere new feel like home, especially if you don't speak the language, and especially if you are very unfamiliar with the cultural framework. And that's made even harder if you don't know anyone. And so what we at Canopy, and studies have shown this over and over, is it takes about 3 to 5 years to make a brand new place really start to feel like home. And so through our long welcome services, we extend all of our case management, all of our employment services for up to 5 years. And that's really focused on that sustained well-being for folks so they can really feel equipped to make Northwest Arkansas their new home. So now getting a little bit into the Afghan Placement and Assistance Program. So this is our APA program is what we refer to this as. And this was a program that essentially was built overnight when we saw Afghanistan fall to the Taliban last year. So last August of 2021 is when the world watched the Taliban take over Afghanistan when through the US withdrawal. And so the government responded to the situation through an emergency evacuation of Afghans. And a lot of these Afghans that we were evacuated were folks who would be eligible to come to the United States under the Special Immigrant Visa Program. So as an SIV, a Special Immigrant Visa, these are visas that are given to people in Afghanistan that helped the United States military while they were there. So a lot of these Afghans served as interpreters, engineers, drivers, doctors, all different types of all over the place, how they helped the United States military. And so because of their service and because they risked their lives to work alongside our military, they were promised to come to the United States and be resettled with their families to protect them through a special immigrant visa. But when the United States pulled out of Afghanistan last year and the Taliban swiftly took over, there was no time to get these folks who were granted special immigrant visas to come through that process. And now, in fact, all of these folks who were promised safety were in very grave danger because of their alliance with the United States. And so this program was built overnight. Canopy went from about 9 employees to about 32 employees in less than a year. And since last October, we resettled about 145 Afghans. And to put this into context of Canopy is very small. We started in 2016, so we're really young. And on average, we were resettling about 40 people a year. So we went from resettling about 40 people a year to resettling around 140 people in 4 months. So it was a huge, huge undertaking. And it was really, really tough, but absolutely worth it because we were helping to welcome very real human beings who needed to start over and make a new home. And we're able to do that in Arkansas. So the Afghan Placement and Assistance Program, which was really the emergency program, that closed officially in the spring. And now we will continue to resettle Afghans through the regular resettlement process that we talked about earlier. So it'll be a little bit longer of a process, but we will continue to resettle thousands of Afghans in the United States over the coming years. So Afghanistan today, I'm going to give this really brief piece and then we'll hand it over to my colleague Khalid to talk a little bit about what's happening in Afghanistan. So, you know, the media coverage of Afghanistan has really started to shift away from what's happening in Afghanistan to other crises around the world or sort of whatever the next talking point is. But the reality is that there is still a crisis in Afghanistan. There are still people who are displaced in Afghanistan. There are still people in trouble in Afghanistan. There is still a genocide happening in Afghanistan. And it's very, very hard, even though we don't see it as much in the media. So right now, there are more than 6 million displaced Afghans in the world. 2.5 million are registered refugees, and others 3.5 million are internally displaced, meaning that they have fled their home for safety, but they're still within the country border. Under that APA program we talked about earlier, we resettled around 78,000 Afghans, which is a very small amount when you look at the fact that there are 6 million who are displaced. And so Khalid, I'm going to hand it over to you. And if you'll just share just a little bit about Afghanistan and how folks can continue to support Canopy and the folks in Afghanistan right now.
Yes, thank you, Hannah. My name is Khalid Ahmadzai, and I'm the Director of Economic Advancement for Canopy. I am, Glenn, I'm not a Fulbright scholar, but I went to Fulbright College here in Northwest Arkansas. And I have some great friends from the Fulbright scholars. And I think it's worth mentioning the contribution of Fulbright program in Afghanistan for the last 20 years. This is probably, if I put something that would, and that's not exaggeration because I'm here at the Fulbright call, but it's probably one of the biggest contribution in Afghanistan as far as human capacity. Those individuals who graduated from Fulbright scholars who went back to Afghanistan and contributed immensely. Because one of the biggest problem in Afghanistan. So I'll just go back a little bit with the history. I think it's worth mentioning about during the Cold War, Afghanistan was the hotbed of that war, where the USSR was expanding and Afghanistan became the battleground between these, trying to prevent the USSR army to reach to the Cold War. And it's been before I was born. The Russians invaded the country, or USSR Red Army. And when people ask me what are the 3 words you learned at the beginning when I was a child, it was mom, dad, and BBC. And part of it was just we grew up with learning, hearing about the news about who is in control. And this has been going on for over like 4 decades now. And so the past 20 years, after 9/11, the US finally paid attention again to Afghanistan and what it was turning into. While initially Afghans were the first victims of this terror, and then 9/11 kind of triggered that conscious. And the past 20 years, we have seen a glimpse of hope after 3 decades of war and or 2 decades of war and craziness. And then one of the things that were really difficult to fill was the brain drain, because there was no human capacity in the country. And then the Fulbright scholars, they came in, got their education, went back to Afghanistan and contributed immensely in rebuilding of the nation. And lo and behold, we didn't know what would happen. Just last year, we all saw on the news and our screens of desperate people trying to reach the airport and leave the country. And that's kind of like a glimpse of seeing the hopelessness in the country. I moved to the US in 2010 and I came here and studied at the Fulbright College. I'm married to an Arkansan from Batesville, metropolitan city of Batesville, Arkansas. And we lived here for a couple of years in Northwest Arkansas, and then I went to Little Rock, and then from there I went to back to Afghanistan. And my connection with Canopy goes back all the way to 2016. As 2015 and 16, as Canopy was just a Facebook page trying to put together a group of concerned citizens who really wanted to help with the refugees. And when I moved back to the US in 2018, I was one of the few Afghans here in Northwest Arkansas. We were the endangered species, if you call, because there was I could text and then have everybody, all the Afghans here in Northwest Arkansas, all of us would have been there for a cup of chai or a meal together in 15 minutes. The number was a whopping number of 5 Afghans here, and 4 of them was those Fulbright scholars. And now we have 150 Afghans here. So it's little that we know that Northwest Arkansas would be a home for that many Afghans here. after the fall of Kabul in August, we saw the hopelessness, we saw what was happening, and but the reality was also it's just going to be on the screen for a few days, and maybe an anniversary after a year, and then it'll be forgotten. And that's really the truth. The population of Afghanistan is 35 to 40 million people, and the size is the size of Texas. And the 78,000 Afghans were resettled here in the US. But during that 15 days of August 15 to end of August in 2021, the number of Afghans who were evacuated from Afghanistan, which was the largest humanitarian evacuation in the history, was 120,000. Some other countries helped resettle those Afghans, Canada and some European countries, Australia. So they participated in that resettlement as well. So from 120,000, 78,000 ended up in the US. The rest is kind of scattered at other different parts of the world. And in April of this year, I decided to take despite everybody's advice, I decided to go to Afghanistan to see it for myself and see how things are. It was, I think, to say hopeless is just it was just chaos. And that is 8 months into the Taliban. I walked to Kabul airport and walked out of that place, and what I saw was just disaster. The economic, because a lot of the economy in Afghanistan was built around service industry, and so all these aid organizations and military, there was a lot of people were getting their salaries based on working with NGOs, and all of a sudden, with the US withdrawal and Taliban takeover, everything just collapsed, and it literally overnight. When I had friends and family who were part of that evacuation, they're trying to, and Hannah and my colleagues here at Canopy saw how that time was just stressful, because you get calls from friends and family, and they're desperate, they want to leave, and yet there's nothing you can do. It was, I called our representatives and trying to see what we can do on our end. But going back to Afghanistan was just kind of confirmed that what was happening. The economy was just in a free fall. The population in the past, when there was so this is a picture of Kabul. I'm just going to disappear here for a second. This is the capital, Kabul city, and the population is 5 million people, and out of 5 million people, I think when in the past, when there was a rocket attack or an explosion by the Taliban, now the current de facto regime, people did not lose hope. They came and fixed it and they moved on. But this time around, what I saw was just unbelievable. Like, there was no hope, and people were like, okay, if I could find a way to leave, I would leave. And I think we will see the brain drain of those who contributed in Afghanistan for the last few years, that those who would leave, and then I think it would be a bigger mess in years to come. It's an unfortunate situation. It took 20 years for that institution to build up, and took overnight to be dismantled, and now we will see that again, unfortunately. So that's the dire situation. You saw the news, you're seeing the news, what's happening. The girls are not allowed to go 7th and to 12th grade. They're not allowed to go to classes. The freedom of the speech, which was probably unparalleled around the neighboring countries, has just completely disappeared. People who worked in the previous government in any shape or form, they are being hunted by the Taliban, and even some of the people who are here their families are threatened in Afghanistan by the current de facto regime. And it's really it's 30 to 40 million people are hostage to this group that are not allowing just some of the basic things. I don't think Afghans are asking for anything extra, just the education and room to breathe. And even that is taken from them. So I'm afraid that the news from Afghanistan is not great, and it will continue to be this way for foreseeable future. I wish there would be an answer to all this chaos, but I would like for you all to kind of dig into the news and find out what is happening, and just maybe contact our representatives to say this cannot continue. This should not continue. And I hope the world will pay attention and bring some sort of resolution to this crisis in Afghanistan. So that's my a little bit about Afghanistan. And I'm sure during the Q&A there will be some questions, and I'll be more than happy to answer. Hannah, back to you.
Yes, thank you, Khalid Jan. And Khalid, can you actually just talk a little bit about, from your perspective, how some of our Afghan families that we've resettled through Canopy, how are they doing in Northwest Arkansas? And of course, we talk a lot about this, but the barriers that we continue to see.
I think a lot of the many Afghans who came, what war does is scatter people around the world. And Afghans, like all those population of, we have some connections. Like when I moved to the US, I have 2 uncles and aunt who living in the US, in Boston area. So just like that, many Afghans have some sort of connection in the US or around the world, just not only the US. And when they, in Arkansas, as you can tell, as I mentioned, like there were really only 5 of us, and there was not a lot of connection. So even Arkansas for a lot of people was just really like we refer them as flyover states. And for many Afghans, it was they didn't even heard about Arkansas. So everything was Virginia and California, in New York, East and West, and everything else was in between was unknown. And so when they came to Arkansas, obviously there's a lot of shock to the system, because you're coming to a place. And when I remember when I came, I was missing these mountains in my background. This is where I grew up, so I wanted to see mountains, and my family said, "Well, we'll just go to Mountain View. You miss mountains." And I went to Mountain View, Arkansas, and I thought it was like a stop for getting a Coke or a coffee, and that was not. They said, "No, this is Mountain View, Arkansas." So I think there was shock to the system, but then just the overwhelming support that was received by the arms open. I think the Southern hospitality was just was very alive in that process, and folks who came in, obviously there's trauma involved with the going. We saw the pictures. How that evacuation took place, and then after this Afghan evacuees were departed, they did not come directly. They went to military camps and stayed there for 3-4 months, even longer, until their cases were resolved and all the connections were made. So there's a lot of that time of just not knowing, and just limbo, the place in between. And when they came in here, I think the barriers were, language was obviously a barrier, but it was, I'm amazed how quickly they were able to, especially the young kids and families who went to school, quickly picked up the language. And now the child who was in the past was just the parents were helping, and now they're being helped to parents, translating and reading things back to whether they're bills or receipts or whatnot. And the employment, the employers from all over the state, they reached out to us, and with the fall of Kabul, they said, what can we do to help with Afghan refugees here? And so the support from the community was just overwhelming. And I, as an Afghan, was just witnessing that even before Afghans arrived here, the support for the community, and it's just been incredible. So all these fellows are employed, and they're working hard. One of the other barriers were the transportation, which was really trying to get from point A to B. A lot of big cities that you don't need a car. Public transportation is available. Northwest Arkansas, if you don't have a car, it's almost impossible. With our advocacy and support of our partner organization, the governor made sure that we do get some with bringing a translator to obtaining a driving license, and that really helped. Many of our Afghan clients who were able to drive, but just the language of, especially when you're trying to take a test in a different language. I'll tell you this little story. When I was doing my driving license test here in Arkansas in 2010, there was one question of like, can you drink and drive? And obviously it was not clear for me. It was drink and drive, and my answer was yes. And I was like, how much you can drink and drive? I said, as much as possible. And later, the officer told me, he's like, son, I don't know which country you came from, but in this country, you cannot drink and drive. I'm like, why not? Why you have drive through Sonics and McDonald's? And I said, you know what I'm talking about. And later I figured out that that was alcohol, but it was not clear in the question. So even I, who came with a little bit of English, had struggled with that. So so this many folks are able to drive now and start their lives from scratch, and it's going to take time, as Hannah mentioned. Resettlement is going to take over 2 or 3 years, so there's going to be a bumpy ride, but the trajectory is set to be this is a home for them, and they're gonna thrive and be successful as time moves on.
Yeah, thank you, Khalid.
There's one question. Okay, sorry, that was get your questions ready.
Yeah, I think Leah's gonna do them. Are you
I
gonna
have a question. Hannah, how many families have been resettled in Northwest Arkansas?
So we've resettled about around 450 people, which averages out to about 150 households. And so our families, the size of our families are really different. Sometimes we can get a single person, and then other times we'll get really big families. So a lot of times our families have a lot of kiddos. And as you can imagine, a family trying to find affordable housing near transportation, public transportation for a family of 9 with a single mom is really, really hard. So that's something we run into a lot.
Yeah.
I see Miss Arlene.
Arlene, go ahead and unmute yourself. So if you've got your hand up, the physical hand is fine. You don't have to use your electronic hand, but I do need to see your face. Go ahead, Arlene.
I have enjoyed all of your remarks, and I am extremely interested. I am a retired elementary school teacher, and what we have found in Little Rock is that we do not have a Pashto speaker, which is the language that our family of 14 speaks. I'm wondering, our school district has made an effort to accommodate the Afghan families. However, placing them all in one school is absolutely impossible. So their financial resources have gone to one elementary school, and it has left the other elementary schools without any support for the classroom situation. How might we get some type of grant given to the school district specifically to recruit an Afghan speaker that would help teachers and students make this transition a little bit easier?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And that's tough. That's really tough. We actually met some folks from Central High School in Little Rock and kind of had a similar conversation about accommodations. I would say, Miss Arlene, the best thing to do would be to connect with Catholic Charities in Little Rock. Have y'all connected or have you tried? But no response. Oh, Miss Arlene, you are muted.
Sorry, it's not that we don't have any connection with them. It's that the timing is, I mean, we're doing this now for a year, and we have no teachers in the school that my family is attending to help both a set of twins in the 3rd grade and a young man in the 7th grade. And so I tutor them, and they've made wonderful progress. But getting the teachers to make the accommodations on a daily basis is beyond their training. And so, and also they have other students to accommodate for as well. It would be tremendously helpful if we could find a way to get the school district to be able to hire someone that could help in the driver's license. We have a 16-year-old Afghan boy who does go to Central and has made a couple of efforts to pass the driver's test. I don't know exactly where he is in that process now, but getting the catalog, the instruction book to take your permit, we had to find somebody who could interpret that. And so it has made everything tremendously long in trying to get it accomplished.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I think one thing I can do is I think this will be a long-term situation. We'll have to take a lot of different steps. I don't think it'll be something we can fix or figure out overnight. But I can speak to the fact that Canopy, we were able to work with the school district, and the school district created a part-time position for liaison that would work with the Swahili speaking families. So what I will do is follow up with our school system and our youth, because we also have a youth services coordinator, to see what that process was like, what was the grant for that, and then connect you with those contacts, because it sounds like that's what you're wanting to do. Like that would be a helpful.
Yes, I wanted to do whatever will help the majority of the Afghan students who have come to Central Arkansas. We are not making a good educational connection between their needs and our ability to meet them.
Okay, I will certainly look into that and can connect you with some of the things Canopy has done.
And Arlene, I'm sorry, I keep muting you because we're receiving some feedback, and but it's not your fault. I have a question. Glenn, do you want to go ahead and ask your question? You have to unmute. You're still muted. Okay, Glenn's question is, are people still leaving Afghanistan? Glenn asks, are people still leaving Afghanistan over land routes through Pakistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Iran, etc.? And what is happening to those families in terms of resettlement in the US, Europe, and Canada? And Glenn, you're unmuted now. So did I get that right?
Right, thank you. Mm-hmm.
So the evacuation, there are still some vulnerable Afghans who were eligible for the special immigrant visa, that they're still in the country. And I have some, just as of the latest one was last 10 days ago, that I know somebody was able to leave the country. A lot of these things are done through the intermediary Qatar embassy in Kabul. That they are evacuated. They're not evacuated. They are flown to Qatar, and then they are conducting their interview to come to the U.S. But that was a very small number, really, really small. We're talking about the probably less than 100 individuals who are in that situation. Maybe a little bit more, but it's not that small. As far as evacuation for other Afghans, Tajikistan is obviously not very friendly right now. They've been evacuated some Afghan refugees who didn't have any refugee status, and in Tajikistan they forced them back to Afghanistan. And Turkey is similar. Turkey has sent some Afghans who were without documents, and Turkey, on the hopes of coming to Europe or through UNHCR, and then find they were sent back to Afghanistan. Pakistan is the road is closed, the border, but in order to get, which is really a normal distance, it's like 2.5 hours. With a paved road, you can get to Pakistan. But right now, what happened after the fall of Kabul, Pakistan closed the border, and the flight, and they only give tickets to or visas to people who have emergency or family emergency or doctor's appointment or medical need. And they offer them visas only if they have tickets on the plane, which is literally less than an hour a flight from Kabul to Islamabad, the capital. And the price for each ticket is closer to it used to be $2,000, and now it's somewhere else $1,200. Just a 45 minutes or 1 hour flight. And so that's a very small number of people who could afford that and to leave. So it's there's no, if the borders are open, and I understand Pakistan and Iran's, if the borders are open, I think a lot of people would leave this mess that is there. And so the countries are blocking their borders, and still there's some people are going smuggled through the borders to Iran in the hope of going to Turkey. And social media, almost every day I see somebody who died on the way from Iran to Iraq, or and these are the people who are like they were journalists, they were TV reporter that people knew about, and when they die, there's some pictures of them on the media or social media with Afghans. But I'm certain that there's probably many more who are not getting the attention. And then just recently there was a ship that was sank in Mediterranean Sea among many other refugees. There were 4 Afghans who were part of that situation, unfortunate situation. So Glenn, the answer is by land, not to Tajikistan and any of the stans up north. They have, I think, the beginning last August, I saw reports of Russians and or the USS of the Russian Federation brought some of the soldiers on the border to not allow Afghans going that direction. So it was kind of like a big prison, so that resettlement in the U.S., Europe, and Canada is all in the mercy of. There's still 4,000 or 5,000 Afghans in Qatar, in Abu Dhabi, and United Arab Emirates, the humanitarian village, and there's some Afghans in Albania and Czechoslovakia, in some other countries that they were evacuated, but they were. It's a really unfortunate situation. They were evacuated in planes that were not military, and therefore the military is like, well, that's not our problem. So those countries are now have these number of Afghans, and Canada, the US asked Canada to help with some resettlement, and Canada has extended the help and resettle some Afghans. And still there's, so from 120,000 that were initially evacuated, there's still some pockets on lily pads in third countries, and that they will be resettled over some time.
In the 1 minute we have left, Hannah, I'm kind of summarizing some questions that I've received in the chat and on Facebook, but basically I know we have several different congregations represented in this Zoom room today, faith-based congregations. I won't list them all because I don't know if I'll miss some people, but we have several faith-based congregations. And so what are some things that both individuals and congregations can do to help your efforts, not just only in Northwest Arkansas, but around the state? Several of these congregation groups I know are currently housing families from Afghanistan specifically, but may be interested in more opportunities to get involved.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. There are so many ways to get involved. Some of the best ways to get involved in the Northwest Arkansas region, and then I'll talk more about the state as well, are co-sponsor teams. So as a faith community, you can get together and form a team of 6 to 8 people, and we will match you with a new family, and you'll walk alongside them for their first 6 months in Arkansas. It's an incredible way. It's an incredible way to get involved. I believe Catholic Charities down in Little Rock have something similar. And so if you are in that area, that's an incredible way to get involved. If you are further away, financial support is huge. It makes a massive impact. On average, to resettle a family of 5, it costs about $20,000 to support them for their first 8 months. So that includes finding housing, helping with rent and utilities for their first 3 to 6 months, mattresses, household items, case management services, and employment services. Through all of our government funding and the $1,200 we ask co-sponsors to help fundraise, we are still left with about a $5,000 gap for a family of 5. And so becoming a household sponsor is a huge impact. That helps us close that gap. And so we have a lot of faith communities who commit to being a household sponsor to help us resettle a family of 5. So I can send more information about that. If you are in, again, Northwest Arkansas, and you want a tangible way to help, building a welcome kit, which is a kit of all the household items for a specific room for a new family. If you have connections in housing or policy, please let us know. Please get with us on that. That is massive. Housing is a huge barrier. Affordable housing is really, really hard to come by in Northwest Arkansas and Little Rock. And policy is really important. We want to move some policy forward with SNAP benefits and TANF benefits, for example. So if you know folks in that realm, please let us know. Those are 2 massive needs.
Well, so we have some follow-up to do with you, Hannah, but I really just want to close this. You've given us an overview and an introduction. Khalid, thank you so much for sharing your experience with us and inspiring message. We really appreciate your perspective. I want to thank Dee Dee Long and Fulbright for partnering with us, and along with Canopy, and Glenn for making it all, for connecting us all together. We were not sure whether we were going to record this, but now that we have and we're given permission to do so, we can put this recording of this presentation on the Life Quest of Arkansas Facebook page. That means that you can direct, that's a public Facebook page, you can direct people to view it, you can share it from there. We can also connect you to Canopy and directly and put Hannah's link, if that's okay, on our Facebook page, so that if you want to get more involved with what Canopy does or ask questions, you can do that from our page and then connect directly with Canopy on their link. As always, reach out to LifeQuest for your questions, comments, and ideas for future programs. Thank you, everyone, for coming today and hearing this impressive presentation. Thank you so much, Hannah.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you. Thank all of you. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.